Hey, fitness fans, we're back. This is Eric Malzone with the Future of Fitness podcast and the Fitness Marketing Alliance, and this is episode number 11. And we are talking to Erin Cafaro Mackenzie, and she's got her own Wikipedia page, so you can learn all about her. But a quick synopsis is that she's a two-time gold medalist in 2008, 2012 for the women's 8-person row. So she has a lot of medals. And if you go and just look her up and Google her, you'll see all of her accomplishments as an athlete, and it's tremendous. And going into this interview, I didn't have a lot of expectations, but I came out of it with just an incredible amount of life lessons and insight. And the really, really cool thing about Erin, there's a lot of cool things about Erin, but that she was extremely open to being vulnerable. I mean, she got into areas of, her battles with, I guess the post-athlete life where, you get gold, right? Where do you go from there? What's higher than that? And then what happens to an athlete after that point? And she's very raw, very honest with what's going on. She talks about Power Speed Endurance, which her husband, Brian Mackenzie, is the founder of, which formerly was CrossFit Endurance. And she's just really cool. She was really fun to talk to. And anytime I get to talk to athletes and investigate what makes them special at that level, it really makes my day. So really enjoy this. And of course, we're going to talk about our sponsor, Busy Bar. And you can find them at www.busybar.co. And they have all three of their flavors, right? Peanut butter being my favorite, followed by cookie dough and double chocolate chip. These only have 1 gram of sugar, only 6 net carbs, and 9 grams of fiber. And it's the highest quality protein available with grass-fed whey. So if you go to busybar.co, you can enter the code FMA10, Fitness Marketing Alliance 10, and you get 10% off every product, every order from now until the end of time. So dig into this interview. It's a bit longer than usual, but you really will enjoy it. And ladies and gentlemen, Erin Cafaro Mackenzie. Everybody, this is Eric with the Fitness Marketing Alliance, and I'm really excited to be chatting with Erin Mackenzie this morning.
Hey.
Thank you for coming on, Erin. So I'm going to give a quick synopsis, but I think you're going to tell your story much better. You are a gold medalist in 2008 and 2012 in the women's 8 for rowing.
Yep.
You are from Modesto, California.
Yep.
Which I know.
Good place to be from.
Yeah. You went to Berkeley, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go Bears.
And you had a slight segue in Australia for a little while. Is that correct?
Oh, look at you. You really did do good.
Yeah. Well,
good
it was for the
homework.
Andy Petronics podcast. If you guys don't listen to that, you should.
Yeah.
And then you currently are a coach at Power Speed Endurance as well, and you work with your husband.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. So my first question is, and maybe I'm going to put, this isn't about me, but I'm going to put this in a little context because my background in athletics was aquatics. So I was a swimmer since the age of 5 and water polo player. And I thought I knew suffering through those two sports.
Mm-hmm.
And then I found CrossFit. And then I found the rowing erg, right? And
there's nowhere to escape. There's no other kettlebell pull-up exercise to escape. You just have to keep going, pushing through.
It's just you and suffering. And so my first question for you is, what's wrong with you? Why did you choose? How did you land in rowing? And how did you just basically, how do you excel in a sport that's it's just suffering?
Oh gosh. To be honest, I think I was drawn to it because of the simplicity of it. I mean, obviously when you break down any sport, it can get into such minute details, and it is quite a technical sport, especially on the water. So, erging has its own, erging is its own beast because that is just suffering. And yes, there's technique, and, ways to help accelerate and use your body weight more. But when you add in the element of water, as you know, as a swimmer and a water polo player, there's, it's just a whole nother physics experiment. And so, and there's blade placement, and then you also have to coordinate every movement with the person in front or behind you, because that will set off the boat. So it's like, how much can you suffer and then not, want to punch the person in front or in back of you for setting off the boat, So it is a great human experiment. And you know what? I think, without going in too deep, and I've told the story of how I started rowing, plenty of times, and it was just literally, off of a fluke of I wanted to play basketball. I wanted to play a sport, but I really loved basketball growing up. And I had a horrible junior season in high school, and my dad just left a newspaper article on the kitchen counter about this girl of one of our rival basketball towns called Turlock. She got a scholarship to University of San Diego and was trying out for the 2004 Olympic team. And I was like, who is this girl? If this girl from Turlock can do it, I can do it. So, I mean, the more it's funny, as I age and the more I understand my parents and how, what happened to me and where I came from, I was raised in a very competitive environment. It was very supportive, but competitive. It was like, there was never like, no, you can't do that. It was like, well, she's doing it. You should do it, and do it better, which has its positives and negatives to it. Cause it was never, I was never really satisfied, but, yeah, that's how I got into rowing. I have it's funny. Like, I think my athletic background is a little bit more colorful than most athletes. I actually grew up dancing, classical ballet from age 2 to 14. And then transitioned over to basketball, track and field, cross country, all of that stuff. And everybody, I just think that that's such a good story for non-specialization, because I really couldn't think of any better combination to make the perfect rower. You get rhythm, you get endurance, you get agility with basketball. So it just created almost the perfect storm to be a successful rower.
Yeah, it's, I think if you watch any athlete at the top of their game in any sport, they make it look easy, right? And on a personal anecdote, one of our clients, when I owned my gym, tried to bring 8 of us out to Lake Kachuma outside of Santa Barbara and put us on an 8-person boat and have us row. It was, I want to say it was funny, but it wasn't, because it was so hard.
You can laugh now.
Yeah, I can laugh now, but at the point I was like, God, you hit the paddle, you turn the paddle the wrong way. I'm sorry, I'm probably using the wrong nomenclature.
No, sorry, it's all good.
And then everything gets skewed. I think I was this close to being thrown out of the boat because I hit the paddle wrong. Yeah. What my point is, it's very difficult, but you guys make it look very easy. And it's interesting too, because having a ballet background, I've always seen as I coach athletes, is that people with backgrounds in like dance or ballet or gymnastics tend to adapt faster than anybody else. Just because if I say, hey, put your left hand up here, you do it. Other people will be like, out this way, right?
Yeah, just self-awareness.
Space, yeah. So it's really interesting. And I think what I find interesting too about what you do, and we'll get into this, but you do actually explain your event, the event that you did. Explain what that was.
Yeah, so in both Olympics, it's kind of funny. Rowing only comes on the radar every 4 years. But every other year, so the 3 years in between, there's a world championships. Actually, there is a world championships in the Olympic year too, but that's for like the non-Olympics. But so in the off years, I pretty much specialized in the small boats, which was just 2 people. And it's just imagine spending more hours than you do with your significant other in a small vessel in the middle of the water. And the only way to get back to shore is by getting along and basically communicating. with the other person. And that I just love the challenge of that, because in my young age, I was a little bit of a fireball and a spitball, and it was like at any cost I was going to win. I was going to win every single stroke, every race, everything, and I would just get that person to come along, and sometimes it would work out really well because that person just needed that energy, and then sometimes it would just clash. But regardless, it taught me so much about human dynamics and communication, and that you can't just be concerned with your own agenda. And to be honest, I was a bit undersized, even though I had, the fire of 1,000 dragons. I definitely was not the strongest or the fastest rower. And so once I figured out that I was not the most important part or person in the boat, that's when I actually started really going fast. When I started paying attention to the other person in the boat and like, how can I make them go faster than they've ever gone? And that was, that was something that one of their assistant coaches, Laurel Corholes, told me. And she was just, she had just come off. She was a 3-time Olympian. And I was like, and she was actually one of the really fast, talented rowers. But she was like, there's this girl I rowed with, and she literally nobody could beat her, because every time she got in the boat with someone else, she would make them faster than they were before. And I was like, well, that's pretty awesome. And that seems pretty easy, like, especially in this sport of suffering, where like, so you get so all consumed with your own suffering that you forget about somebody else. And so once you kind of flip that paradigm and like, hey, like, how can I actually make this person better or work on them versus just work on myself, things just started clicking. And it kind of took off from there. And the priority boat was actually the women's 8 for both of our years in 2008 and 2012 Olympics. And so the coach would stack the boat, was what you call it, and just with all the talent. And the boat has been actually undefeated for 10 years. The World Championships right now in Sarasota, Florida, which is like the first time there's been a rowing race in the U.S. since Atlanta 96 Olympics. But it's not looking so good for the girls. So that, knock on wood, I hope they don't. Actually, you know what? It might be exactly what they need to lose, but it's been over a decade of undefeated for the U.S. women in the big old 8.
That's awesome. That's tremendous. And there's some really valuable life and business lessons in some of the stuff you just said there. Coming from the place of like, I'm going to make everyone on my team better versus like, I need to be the star, right? Mm-hmm. Question for you: when they're stacking these teams and they're putting, very talented people, how much does the team, like if you look at basketball as a sport, right? Obviously, you know it really well. Sometimes, what was it, the Lakers? What year did they stack it with like Karl Malone? Yeah. Right, and it turned into a mess, right?
The
so just
superstar team,
right? How big is chemistry within rowing among teammates versus just putting the most talent as possible on the boat?
Yeah, it totally is. And the hard part, especially about selecting an 8 or even a basketball team, is there is a lot of choice left up to the coach, right? Because you can do selection based off of erg tests. That's why, it's really important. I just say that's how you get your foot in the door. Is just get a good erg test. You'll get your foot in the door and the coach will see you, but that's not going to make the boat. And I think that is really hard to swallow for some people. They're like, hey, this person, is like the fastest person on the team. Well, if they don't meld well with the rest of the team, then what use are they? It's just, you can be the smartest, the fastest, the strongest person in the room. But unless you're in a single or you are doing an individual sport, even then, like every individual sport is still a team sport because you have this whole network you rely on, right? So even if you are the talent, you have to have chemistry, and you have to, make sure that you're getting the most out of your coach, or you're getting the most out of, your significant other with the support. I think that was such a good life lesson, especially younger. It's such a weird dynamic, being a professional amateur athlete. But when you tell someone you're training for the Olympics, literally people will give you shit for free and do all this like super gracious stuff. And my parents would literally not tell me, my stuff, like when relatives passed away, or, stuff like that, because they just want to protect you. They want you to do your best. But I think I finally, I would say it was actually my last year, I finally realized that, like, hey, it's not just about the Erin show, it's like, this is everybody else's dream too. It's not just mine. Like, it actually turned into more of something, especially when I met Brian, like my husband now, and he was just like, he would give his every waking second to like, what can I do? Like, he cooked me meals. He did the laundry and folded my sports bras. He will tell you that 10 times over. But, and it really isn't just about your own dream, and it's not, you're never on your own team.
Yeah, it's interesting. And there's, there was a book I read a while ago, and it was talking about relationships. And if you just focus on making the other person in the relationship happy, you tend to be happy too. Right? Mm-hmm. That's your focus, and both people are focused on it. If only one person's focused on it, then it gets a little tricky. But that's a really interesting point. So I'm curious too, because as an athlete, tell us about the human experience of a race. Like, especially at something at that level. Like, what's the day before like? What are the moments before? What's going on in your head? And for those of you who I don't know what an erg is, we're talking about a C2 rower. Rowing machine, and the distance, it's 2,000 meters, right?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. I used to joke that everyone only has a certain amount of 2K rows in them before they literally just fall over and die, right? Because it's just like,
that might be true.
It's this, God, you go to places, if you haven't tried it, try it.
Yeah.
Right? Go and try it. Give it your all out effort. For
the ultimate question that I don't have any kids, but that everybody always asks is like, what's more painful, childbirth or 2K? And everybody says a 2K.
Yeah. Well, obviously I don't know one, but I would say that I've had some dark times on the rower, and it's usually involved the 2K. Yeah. So anyway, getting back to the point, tell us about, like, when you're prepping with your team for, you got something big coming up. What's that human experience? What does it feel like, especially being on the boat? The preparation, the thought, the afterwards, everything. Like, walk us through that whole experience. And I can see you're probably adrenaline starting to spike a little bit just from thinking about it, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to like dig into where I got this from, but I've always loved competition. Like, I've always loved, well, I kind of touched on it with my parents, I guess.
Yeah.
But I haven't had that like, anxiety stiffening feeling before a race. I was always like, yes, I get to like go race. And don't get me wrong, like, I still had butterflies, would have those doubts of like, I don't know if I can win or I can, do well. Those would still come in, but I actually learned to use those thoughts as a sign that I was ready to race. If I did not have that adrenaline and those butterflies, there was actually a couple of races where I was so mellow before sitting at the starting line that I just got dropped, And so it's something we try to just mellow ourselves out, not make the highs too high or lows too low. But I think if we can learn to, this is going to sound super cheesy, but like ride the waves of them, and learn how to like be in those moments of like highs and lows, then you can actually use them to your advantage. So preparing for a race, it's always, I guess I would liken it to being super prepared for a test that you're studying one subject, for 4 years.
Yeah.
And you're just like, I am so ready to take this freaking test, that you just want to like, you can just like chew on it, versus like just showing up to a test and you're like, I don't know if I'm ready. I never really had that feeling of, I don't know if I'm ready for this. So, especially, at the 2008 Olympics, I was only on the team for 2 years at that time. So I was still a little bit of a young buck, but I just remember being so excited to race and to be there. And I literally, still in the warm up, thought I was going to shit my pants. But that was like, okay, like I'm ready to go. And I almost wanted that energy to build up, and like, I don't know, I always feel it kind of like in my belly, like down low. And so I wanted that energy to just kind of like be there. It was almost like a ball of fire that like I could just kind of hold on and like let build up. And then when it was time to go, I could just open it up and let it go. So I don't know, I'm going off on tangents, but
No, it's really
the
cool.
day,
The imagery is really cool. I mean, it really
yeah.
is like that fireball. I can start to feel it in the way you talk about it. And, I'm curious because you say when there's times when you weren't in that optimal state, like you've learned from experience what that optimal state is before a race. Is there anything you could do, or any tricks you had that, if you just felt like, I'm a little too calm, or, I don't have those butterflies that I need to perform off. Is there any way that you got yourself ready? Is there any like things you did to prep yourself within a 10-minute span? Be like, I'm not ready. Okay, now I'm ready. And you breathe in.
Yeah, actually, I mean, ironically, because my husband's gotten so into the breathing path, which is just so funny because like everybody can probably recall subconsciously of times when breathing has really affected their state, right? And he's just gotten into, deep down the rabbit hole of how to actually use your breathing to get yourself in the state that you want to be in. And as you asked that question, that was one of the things I did at the starting line, and everybody who I competed against would definitely know when I was on the starting line, because you get there about 5 minutes early. But sitting there at the starting line, you're just kind of like there with your thoughts and your adrenaline. And I would do these like huffing breaths, which was almost like, now that I know, it was scrubbing off CO2, and it would also increase my adrenaline. So if I was there and I didn't really feel anything, I would just do these like really hard out breaths. And then would do that. It would almost like clear my throat, because
Right.
you don't want any of that like shit dangling down in your throat when you're breathing hard either. So,
You'll literally throw up, right?
yeah, I didn't really have that much of a gap. I don't think I ever threw
Yeah,
up
we're
from
gonna say I
that,
did.
but like, yeah, there was definitely plenty of people who had that lactic reaction. So, but I would do those hard exhale breaths, and I don't even know if Brian and I have talked about it, but like it just makes sense that actually is similar to this guy who was his mentor for a bit, Wim Hof. Like he has that's his method of like blowing off CO2. But it's more of an even breath, like and I actually had quite an adverse reaction to that. I did his 10-week program, and not being able to immediately use that adrenaline or be able to go train or get ready for a race. And I think also for me, I couldn't summon the demons every day. And that was the 10-week program, right? You had to like do this deep, hard breathing every day. And I think it actually just kind of threw me off my kilter. And that was another reason that like sent Brian down the rabbit hole of like, hey, like not all of these breaths are working the same on everybody. So let's kind of take inventory of their emotional state. And we have this with on power speed endurance. It's an emotional reactivity test. So we can actually see what your state is right now, like what your general state is right now. And then with your CO2 tolerance or your carbon dioxide tolerance, then you can get, numbers that help you, that are feasible for you basically to inhale and hold and exhale. So it's taking what, people like Wim, who is, he's such a great human. And all these yogis that have been doing it for thousands of years. Even if you've gone to a yoga class, I'm sure they've told you to concentrate on your breath. It's taking what they've done and almost personalizing it a little bit more to help you get in the state that you want versus a one size fits all model.
That's really interesting. And I do enjoy a good talk about energy systems. So I want to talk about the 2K row for a second, and then I want to come back to that. So the 2K row, and correct me if I'm wrong because you're the expert here, you essentially, to get out ahead of the pack in the first section, you got to go anaerobic. It's a sprint, right? Then you settle into this kind of high aerobic state until the very end where you just drop the hammer towards the finish line. Does that sound about, is that generally correct?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you probably know more about energy systems than I do, but I don't think there's anything aerobic at that point because you're, I never actually wore a heart rate monitor. And I know they're two different things, but still I was pretty much pegged above, like within 10% of my max for the whole race.
Okay.
So.
Oh, go ahead.
No. As far as I understand, aerobic, you have to be somewhat oxidative, and I don't think you you are very much.
Yeah, it's all the pathways are being used at once. But I guess the point of the question was, to do something like that, where there's so much CO2 that needs to be shuttled, and there's so much lactate that needs to be shuttled too, right? What's difference about do you know anything about your physiology that makes you special in that area? Anything that may have been either earned or gifted due to genetics?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can think of is we would do, VO2 max testing. It's such a exciting number, it's something put on your shoulder. And my VO2 max is it's mediocre, right?
Okay.
But we had this cool physiologist that would come around, and he actually just passed away a few years ago, but he did the US team's VO2 maxes forever. And he was like, you have an extremely high ability to buffer off CO2, or like you're able to expel waste more than I've ever seen. And so I was like, all right, like I didn't even think of it at the time. But again, I guess we can go full circle now that Brian's, been into the breathing and the mechanics and the biology of it. The reason we breathe is not to get oxygen. It's actually to get rid of CO2. So I think we've been kind of chasing after this sexy VO2 number for so long, when in fact, the reason we work out and the reason it feels so good is being able to get rid of that waste.
That's really interesting. And I totally agree with that. Now you got into CrossFit for a while too. That was part of your training, right? And
yeah.
My face just lit up. Yeah. We've struggled with in CrossFit just due to the sport, and I'm shocked actually you didn't do more heart rate work during rowing, during your rowing career, but we've always
heart rate, you said?
Yeah, heart rate. Did you do a lot of heart rate work? Oh, yeah. Okay. I thought you said you did.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, just on the test, I didn't.
Okay.
For the most part, unless it was a VO2 monitoring test, we would take the strap off, but we did a significant amount of we called it steady state. Yeah. But that you have to be under a certain amount or a certain number training.
And that's such a useful tool as a coach, right? And one of the things we've looked at from the CrossFit world, we're trying to learn new things, and we're like, well, what is that metric that we can track? But it doesn't work. We can't do heart rate. right? Because, if you're doing, let's say, a workout that is burpees, thrusters, and rowing, it probably just makes you a little nauseous, right? Look at like the difference. Like in the rower, you can get into a steady state, and then you get a burpees, your heart rate spikes, right? And then you get to the thrusters, then you probably stop breathing a little bit. So then all these things happen. Like we can't use heart rate, right? We can't use that. VO2 max really doesn't tell us anything in the sport of fitness. But the only thing we can look at is maybe someone's lactate threshold, which is, I know, a number that, and that's essentially the ability to pull out CO2. So I'm always curious, like, knowing what you know about this vast world of rowing, what would you, if you're coaching someone in the sport of fitness, what metrics would you use other than their Fran time and other things like that?
I actually, we do something called the metabolic test. That's actually, I just wish I had come across it. We did something similar because we did lactate testing, blood lactate testing too. But on this metabolic test, it is a heart rate test. And Brian's been doing it with a bunch of CrossFit athletes for a long time. And it does measure that lactate, but it also gives you kind of the area, you just set it on a graph. It's a step test. And it's like, hey, where's your heart rate overworking? And how do you make those transitions from, do you even have an aerobic? And that's pretty much what he's found with the CrossFit world is like, they don't have, because it's always spike up and down. And that is a great way to train, that energy system that totally neglected the aerobic system, that base aerobic system. And so for the most part, like it's a lot of just doing work where you can only nasal breathe, right? Nasal in, nasal out. And that will, help suppress and also build up your respiratory system too. But I would say that metabolic test also on power, speed, endurance. I mean, cool. It sounds kind of salesy, but I obviously we would only have it on there if believed in it. But it measures, where are your metabolic holes? And for the most part, what we've seen in CrossFit is like, maybe they should be wearing a heart rate monitor or nasal breathing only and doing a WOD, not all out, like doing their exercise in a certain zone. Right. And that was actually, I think, what I learned and I loved so much about heart rate training. And granted, it is easy because you could always just check it. You're just in one modality going back and forth, scooting on your butt. But I would play this little game of how low can I get my heart rate and how high can I get my output? And I think that's something that for the most part in CrossFit, not many people are doing is they're like, how high can I get my output at any cost? Right. So I guess that's efficiency. Yeah. You're creating a huge engine, but is it efficient?
Well, I don't want to talk too much about CrossFit because I could talk about it forever, but you look at the best, right? You look at the very best at the top of CrossFit and they make weightlifting aerobic, right? If you watch Rich Froning do thrusters, every rep is the same, his breathing is on point, and it's just this beautiful synchronicity of efficiency. Right. And in some ways, like the best of the best are actually doing what you're talking about. But I don't know if anyone's recognized it yet.
Yeah. And I think they attribute that to volume, which I do think, hold on one second. The dog's getting after. He's ready for breakfast. But I think volume, and that's something that I think Brian got hammered on and maybe, misspoke in the beginning, that we were a volume-based program for training for the Olympics, but that's not the only way to build. Doing more that's not that simple. You have, in order to do more, you also have to do this low rate, very unsexy, just 40 minutes at a time. Can we build up this aerobic base? The other piece that I think I see, and someone like Rich, like I've been fortunate enough to train and be around him, and other very talented, I don't like the word talent, but very successful CrossFitters.
Why don't you like the word talent? I gotta ask that.
Because it implies that they were born with it and that they didn't, work for it.
Nice.
But yeah, so what I see is that they are very cognizant of their zones, like where's the red line, and not to, always push that. But they've also found when to, with that, I guess, they've also found when to relax. And that's what, at the highest level of any movement, it's not just about output, it's about relaxation. So even in the rowing stroke, I'm like, as much suffering as there is, like, shit, there's rest built in. Like, you get a recovery. Like, this is great, And you can see that with someone like Rich doing thrusters. He finds where to rest in every movement. And I think that for me, what I found it, because I have this background in dancing and rhythm, but there is, if you can find the energy of the rhythm versus just go, 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 there is ebb and flow that you can work with. And you can also increase that rate of the rhythm. But if you go outside of that, or if it's erratic, that's when you're expending a lot of energy.
So let's talk about, let's shift a little bit. Talk about power, speed, endurance. What is it? What is that? What are you guys doing?
Yeah, so power, speed, endurance kind of stemmed off of the idea of CrossFit endurance, which my husband, Brian, when was it? I think it was 2008, started touring around to different CrossFits and teaching philosophy on this skill intensity, then volume model, and predominantly with running. I mean, running is, probably the most popular sport in the world, probably because it's the easiest. You don't really need any equipment. You don't even need shoes for practically. But so it really changed a lot of people's, like, we were talking about before, it changed a lot of people's idea and love for this sport, that, you think that just because you have two legs and you learn to walk, that you know how to run. And you do until you don't, right? Until you unlearn how to run. And again, I think we just start to ignore the laws of gravity and rhythm and just try to go so hard versus how can we work efficiently and work with what we have. And so with that, what was it? It was like a couple years ago, the seminar business within CrossFit, it just kind of started dwindling. I think personally, because I was actually touring around for Concept 2 doing CrossFit rowing. And I saw the same thing. Like, there just weren't as many interested coaches. I think the coaches were maybe saturated, but also athletes in learning the movement. It kind of shifted with the increase of the games, and everybody just wanted to do these hard, crazy workouts, and lift heavy weights, which is awesome. Like, and it, who's to say that's not wrong at all, but like, they just didn't want to learn the other aspects of movement or another viewpoint of it, I guess, or just become, masters of multiple different domains. And so I shifted, my husband and Brian and I decided to shift CrossFit endurance over to power, speed, endurance, and open up the, not become a seminar model anymore, but basically open up the education and programming for all sports. And we're starting out with just endurance sports. We've actually added on tactical, which is an endurance sport, but definitely a little bit.
Daryl Wang is working on.
Yeah. Okay. Daryl, our buddy Daryl is on there. Obviously, he has the street cred for that. Yeah. But it's just applying a functional movement. CrossFit, like functional movement. The idea with CrossFit is it's constantly varied, and we still hold that with power, speed, endurance. But the sport, when you know what to expect, not so much tactical, but you know what to expect in a running race or a 10K race, you know what to expect in a 2K race. you know the movement. So it doesn't have to be as varied. It can be somewhat more specialized, and especially the training. So we do the power speed endurance. We still hold some educational seminars, and we're working on the online courses for education as well. But there is a daily programming for, if you really want to learn about the sport and you really want to get deep into it. There's 3 days of the sport programming. So we hit short distance, middle distance, and then stamina, long distance. And then there's also 3 days of strength and conditioning that is specialized to that sport. So say, a rower really needs to work on posterior development. You're always in that flex position, right? And so we need to work on getting those hips working and getting into somewhat of an extended position as well, and make sure you're working both ends of the system. So it's just little things like that. And so it was something that, the idea definitely came from our roots in CrossFit, but it just has such a universal application to all these different sports. And I don't know, I guess it's part of my personality, because I picked a sport where you're doing the same darn thing over and over again. And so I like to concentrate and almost be an essentialist, right? Like I like to concentrate on one movement and get good at that. And that's what power speed endurance provides, is something that, like, hey, I actually want to become a student of this sport.
Yeah, there's a lot too. And I'm going to say I'm a glowing endorsement, although I've never really said it publicly, of the CrossFit endurance and what is now power speed endurance, because I hated running, Erin. I hated it. And then, because I would get shin splints. I would always cramp. I would always get all these problems. Eventually, I had to get orthotics in my shoes, right? Yeah. So that was a $500 waste of money.
Yep.
And then I went and I started investigating stuff, and I started doing a little bit of CrossFit endurance and workouts. Started posting. Then I took the seminar, and it was my first time going through that method of learning how to run correctly. And I was like, wow, this is actually not easy. It's not easy. It's easier, but it's a lot less painful, and it was quite enjoyable. And I went through a good 2 to 3 year point in my life where I just started running, started doing races. And, I just added this whole, as a coach, I added this major toolkit, to what I already had, and this understanding, and something that a perspective that I think, if fitness professionals are listening right now, you can't just sit in your silo, right? Mm-hmm. You can't just sit there and you can be excellent at kettlebells, right? You could be the best. Mm-hmm. You could be the best Olympic lifting coach. You could be, all these things. But I think in general, in somewhat the greatest trainers have a specialty, but they're also overall generalists, when you look at it. I think what you guys offer, and just more endorsement of it, was I learned the most about coaching through that certification. I did a lot. Up until I would say the full education I did with OPEX, because that was much more than a weekend. But, as far as the weekend or the 2 or 3 day seminars, I just learned more about programming, more about coaching, more about this whole other world of endurance that's been around forever. So anyway, the point I'm trying to make is it's worth your time as a coach to go check it out. And I think, Brian's in some really cool stuff. And I know, obviously your background speaks for itself. I do have a question from you personally, is you have all this competitive energy, and you have this expertise. How are you utilizing that now in your life, I guess, can we call it your second life as a rower and a wife? And what are you doing with that? Because that's a lot. That's a lot of
time, good. Energy. That's a heavy question.
Yeah, I had a feeling.
Yeah. So I, as I've just been in this physical world for so long, and I actually talked about it I've been, have this connection with the military and veteran community. And I couldn't even, that was one of the tours. I went over to Afghanistan after 2012 and went on a goodwill tour. And it was one of the most eye-opening experiences, of course. So you're, in this like forbidden land, but even more so, I just felt this connection to these, men and women in service. And it just reminded me so much of athletes, and that they're here for a cause, and they're ready and willing to give anything and everything for that cause. And then now with this transition of retiring, like seeing the very similarities of, the veterans, and then, retiring athletes, and what, after you don't have this cause anymore, what happens? These, we're all so good, especially athletes, we're all so good at dealing with physical pain, but I guess, somewhat mental pain. Obviously it's all connected to the nervous system, but when it comes to pain that you aren't deciding to put yourself in, like you were saying, even with running, like shin splints, like I didn't decide to have shin splints. Like that sucks. That hurts. But who's to say that pain is not any worse than something you put yourself through, Fran, right? But you decided to put yourself through, Fran.
Yeah.
So this is kind of where I don't know. I probably have had way too much time to think out here. We moved up to Oregon, and it's just like we're out here in nature. There's not distractions, and I've just tried to really understand what is this transition of like the decision of pain. Like, I don't think we're scared of pain. I think what we're scared of is pain that we don't have control of or don't understand. And so that's where I've kind of, I guess, put my, I don't know if I would want to say competitiveness, but my fireball.
Yeah.
I've started putting it there, and I'm working on potentially going back to school and just, I don't know if I want, the whole PhD ego trip behind my name, but if that will help me learn and understand more, then fucking great. Like, let's do it. And right now that's where I find people that I can have these conversations with, so that hopefully the idea is not to get so lost in this academic world that speaks above, and does all these experiments that nobody understands or can talk about, but to bring it back to this physical world of like, hey, why can we deal with physical pain so well, but mental pain or pain that you can't, that you decide that you haven't, that you haven't decided to put yourself in, why can't we deal with that? It's just fascinating to me. So that's kind of where I'm at. I don't know if I skated the question.
No,
but
that's a cool rabbit hole. I mean, it's got some of the stuff you said in there is just gold nuggets. And it's so true. Like, as athletes, you can control the pain, the pain that you want and that you're searching for. But when life throws shit at you, emotionally or other forms of physical that you didn't expect, or the pain that you don't know, it's shocking. And that's what creates fear. And that's what creates people not pursuing things that they want to do, or dreams or things like that.
Even think about like someone that you just started training, like that has never worked out or is overweight or just beginning, like their fear of pain is so high. Like they don't, because they've never played with it. Right. And they don't understand it. And it's almost like involuntary. So that's why it's almost, you have to ease them into it. But yeah, I think that's something that's just so applicable. Some people have, whether they're blessed or cursed with a hard upbringing, they can probably deal with mental pain better than a lot of other people. Or if you've been doing sports your whole life, like shit, you can deal with physical pain, your limits, but I think it's all has to do with, are you open to being curious about that pain? Are you open to just letting it be versus having to know why? Like, and I think that might be confusing and like curious. Like, of course, I want to know why I'm in pain, but I mean, the question I always used to ask myself in 2Ks or even in any rowing weight race was, is this the worst it's ever hurt? And can I make it hurt more?
Yeah.
Which sounds sick and sadistic, but it was always, and the other question is, am I hurting more than the person next to me? And so it was always questions like this, not like, why does it hurt here? Like, oh, like, how can I get out of this pain? It was almost like, is this really hurt? Like, is this really the worst it could be? And I think, it's so easy for me to talk about that physically because I had gone through so many repetitions of it and successful repetitions of like, hey, like, you're breathing hard. You can't, there's not enough oxygen in the world, but you're okay. Like, have you, can you breathe even harder? Can you make it hurt even more in that right knee? Yeah. And again, I think that there's a blessing and a curse to that, because I've also searched for pain because that's where it makes me feel comfortable or maybe alive. But again, I think going down too far of a rabbit hole.
No, not at all. Not for me. I mean, I could talk about this for hours. I have one more question for you. And this is, so you reached a pinnacle, right? You got the gold medal twice.
How to make sure.
Yeah. The first one was real. So how do you take these expectations now, which were so high, right? And maybe expectations that other people have of you in this next section of your life, or you have of yourself to reach the pinnacle of whatever it is. How are you handling that? How do you incorporate that? Are you even aware of that? Or is that something that I'm just making up in your head?
No, yeah. That's been a big demon I've had to kind of slay. Okay. I got so good at doing what other people would tell me to do or wanted me to do, that I forgot to listen to myself or even learn how. It's been a process of basically the answer is move out to Oregon in the middle of nowhere and then you'll figure it out.
Yeah. Well, I'm in Oregon. Yeah.
Right. But yeah, I mean, I've done a shit ton of work, on myself. And I actually, I have been, I guess ever since before high school, I was on antidepressants and I just have that emotional reactivity, just base layer of me of just being really hard on myself and not meeting other people's expectations. And, I was diagnosed and gave a drug to fix all the problems. And sure enough, when I retired, that didn't, I still had the problems. And when I went off the drugs, or when I was still on the drugs, I still had the problems. So I was like, what's the deal? Like, what is this actually doing, for me? If I, it's more than something Western science or an additive chemical can do for me. So I just basically decided to go cold turkey, which I would not recommend for anyone to go off of, any antidepressant or anxiety medicine, without proper help. But like, I think it was the hardest because again, that was mental pain that I just could not control and I didn't understand and I didn't know why. But I think that has, been the best thing that I've ever done because it helped me give myself time to realize that, like, and just come down off of it and realize that I don't have to compete with everybody, that I can have fun with it. Like that's the kind of bummer thing that I don't think everybody, but a lot of people, who are competitive athletes no longer really, like, my fun was winning, not playing anymore. Like I just wanted to win. Right. That was fun. And I wanted to win again, but I just felt like I couldn't be satiated by anybody because I didn't know how to listen to myself. I was always looking for outside approval. Yes, you're doing the stroke right. Good job. You won the race. Here's a piece of jewelry, and I didn't, the saddest part, which I don't really tell too many people, but like, I was actually kind of sad on the medals podium. Everybody's like, how does it feel listening to the national anthem when it was, playing and you won? And that was not my favorite moment for sure, because I was like, I literally had these like big wide eyes, and I remember I had to watch the freaking medal ceremony a couple times for, some events that I did. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm just so uncomfortable because I did not know what to do next. Like, was somebody going to tell me? What do I race again? Like, I don't really want to race again, but like, what's next? And it really has taken me, it's 5 years to be like, I don't need someone to tell me what to do. Like, I need to figure out how to listen to myself and what do I want to figure out in this time I have in this body on this earth, and that's a heavy question that I was just not ready to answer or explore or anything when I was competing. I just want to run a race, that's it. But then once you get to the end of the rainbow and get that pot of gold, it's like, fuck, now what,
Right. That's, well, I have a gut feeling that when you scratch your itch, right, for this particular issue, that you're going to help a lot of people, because I don't think you're the only athlete that's gone through. I mean, everyone's different. I'm not saying like, the challenges that you're facing now. I think you seem like the person to me who is going to, especially with your new venture in the education piece and everything that you're up to now, I have a feeling you're going to help a lot of people.
No, thanks.
And just through talking, and just honestly through your how raw you are in this interview, and how not scared to be vulnerable, I think those are incredibly endearing qualities that will make you someone that people will come to. And
the USOC hasn't asked me to talk because of my honesty, but that's okay.
Really? Well, there'll be all that love.
They're like, no, we want the little boys and girls and boys to like win more medals. I'm like, is that it? Like,
Yeah.
But I think that might be part of the empowering decision, is that the pain that you're going to put yourself in.
Yeah.
And like we were talking about before, like, I didn't know this was going to be the end result. Like, would I do it again knowing? Yes, 100%. Would I go through all this pain that I, and suckiness of, post-athleteness or whatever you call it, retirement? Yeah, I would, because I've learned a lot. It's like learning from your injuries. But I think maybe it would help athletes going in to it to understand that it's winning gold medal or earning $1 million or whatever your goal is not going to solve all your problems. It just isn't. Like, you just gotta like be happy with what you're doing and understand that it is going to be painful, but to be curious about it and to sounds sadistic, but almost enjoy the pain. See if you can push that threshold a little bit higher.
Yeah. And it's totally honest, which I think, you could, I feel like I could grab my golf club and hit a 9-iron and hit an inspirational speaker in any direction. Right. They seem to be, inspirational speakers tend to be everywhere. Right. Yeah. And to me, I draw inspiration for people who are like, no, this shit's real. This is the challenge. This is what you can expect, but I wouldn't change anything. Right. Yeah. And I think that's, I don't know. It's incredibly powerful to me. And Erin, where do people find you if they want to look you up and they want to do some more information, or maybe they want to talk to you, or maybe there's an athlete who's
in the middle of nowhere, Oregon? Yeah. I've done a good job of kind of being off the grid. I'll come up for air every now and then on the social medias, but I still haven't quite figured out how to use that to help people versus just put more noise out into the universe yet. So, but you can I will respond. I do, I do check it every now and then, but you can definitely find me on Power Speed Endurance. And yeah, just reach out. I mean, if you're, I am totally open to talking to whoever, because I'm just fascinated, not only by my own experience, but again, by like other people's. And we all find solace. I guess that's why podcasts and all these human conversations do so well, because everybody just wants to make sure that they're like, oh, I'm not alone, So if I could be a reassuring voice for someone, then awesome.
Awesome. And if you guys, so her name is Erin Mackenzie. Her maiden name is Cafaro. Am I saying that right?
All the medals were under Cafaro, but
okay,
we gotta get a new.
I know I ate up probably more than the hour than you gave me, so I really appreciate it, Erin. And just keep being you. You're doing great. And yeah, Power Speed Endurance is the other thing that I think coaches should go check out. I highly recommend that. And Erin, thank you so much. I have a feeling we'll be talking soon.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Future of Fitness podcast and webinar series. We're working really hard here to keep great content coming out, and we'd like to express our gratitude by offering you a free 7-day marketing crash course. So here's how you can claim it. If you go to fitnessmarketingalliance.com/free gift, FREEGIFT, and you enter the promo code FITMARK, FITMARK, you can claim it that way. The other way is you can text us. So you can text the phone number 805-619-5550, and you text the word FITMARK, FITMARK. So thank you. Keep listening. Go claim that offer. It's a ton of value. And if you ever want to get a hold of me, or if you have suggestions for guests, topics, or anything else, or if you just want to ask me questions, I always respond. You can reach me at Eric, ERIC, at fitnessmarketingalliance.com. And keep listening. We have a lot more coming down the pipe, and we'll make sure that we're keeping the value great for you guys. And farewell till next time.